Call the meeting to order. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we are a Treaty 1 territory and a traditional homeland of the Métis Nation. I'll introduce the panel members first. Cynthia Stevens to my far left, Robert Upton to my left. The assessor today will be Jennifer Martins, and the administrative assistant today will be Bella Rojo. I'm Marcel Larondo. I'll be chairing. We'll be hearing applications for revision of the assessment rule in accordance with the Municipal Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application. We will limit the discussions to those matters. The statements that applicants or the assessor make at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matter must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessment of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by Council and is independent of it and the City Administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the Board's decision with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or the Court of Queen's Bench if the matter pertains to an application of exemption from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the Board order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the matters to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony, followed by questions that the applicant may have. Then the applicant's testimony, followed by questions. Each side will have the opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the Board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the order by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. Please put your cell phones on silent. We'll be starting with number 3, which is 86 Keewatin. Oh, it's withdrawn, I'm sorry. We're moving down to 1585 Notre Dame. When you are ready, Ms. Martin. Is that Jennifer? Oh, well, yeah, let's get them sworn. That's a good idea. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. I think you're just all permanently sworn in.
State your full name. Jennifer Suzanne Martins. And you swear the evidence you're about to present is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. After that? I do. Please state your full name.
Trevor Gladsnap.
And you swear the evidence you're about to present is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. After that?
I do.
Thank you.
When you're ready, Jennifer.
Thank you. This is roll number 130-624-07000. The assessed value is $3,671,000. This property is classified as 20, so residential 2, with a liability status of grantable. It's an apartment building that was built in 1958 with 55 suites and 40 outdoor parking spots. Look on page 2, we've got an income value summary. We have 11 one-bedroom suites, 44 two-bedroom suites, with an average monthly rent per suite at $727.60. There's a vacancy rate of 3%, expense rate at 58.23%, and a capitalization rate of 5.3, which gives us our $3,671,000. There are some comparables on page 3. We have our capitalization rates on page 4, and we have some examples of our capitalization rates on page 5 as supporting evidence. Page 6 is Municipal Act excerpts, and page 7 and 8 are income information that was submitted to the department, and page 9 is a photograph of the building and a small map. It shows the 4 buildings that are on Notre Dame, across the street from Dangor. Okay? Oh, sorry, Bangor. Thank you.
Questions, Trevor?
Just a couple. I'm looking at the actual year built and effective year built on the front. They're both the same there?
It appears to be so, yes.
So that would indicate that there hasn't been any renovation or significant change to the property over time?
There was a refresh in 2014.
To very select number of suites, correct?
It said, actually it says buildings A, B, C, and D, interior alterations to 4 existing 2-story apartment buildings to include unit refresh, installing new vents, HRV, and electric wiring to be done. So, and in, what else? Upgrades to the laundry room in 2016. And a variety of different plumbing and electrical work has been done.
Okay, so I'll ask the question at the beginning of the hearing then. You have not inspected any of these properties given the time constraints, I imagine?
No, I've not inspected any of the properties or the comparables.
Okay. The age of the property at 1958, with regard to capitalization rate, would that not typically be higher than the 80th percentile?
I think that with the number of apartment buildings that are in that age group, that it's, there would be a lot of properties that are in that age group that would have similar age, similar condition. And in my opinion, it falls within the 80th percentile.
Okay. Page number 5 is the capitalization rate evidence. I have some standard rebuttal, Mr. Chair. And would you like to?
Maybe we'll finish our questioning and then you can do your rebuttal on it.
Those are all of my questions.
Do you have any questions, Cynthia?
No, I don't think I do, thank you.
Robert?
You said there was a refresh in 2014.
Yes.
Do you know that that was just cosmetic in nature, or was it?
It looks, there's a variety of permits that are out for different wiring and things. The refresh was like a unit refresh is usually cosmetic, but some of them also include new windows and things, but I'm not sure if that's what was done. This is mostly interior alteration.
What was the value of the permit?
I'm not sure if I printed out all the permits. Oh, hang on. I did. $150,000.
Okay, okay. And this is subsidized housing then?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Okay, and you showed your calculations all model driven?
Yes.
Thank you. That's it.
Your multifamily cap rates on page 4.
Yes.
You're showing 4 to 7.3 on the high,
Yes.
on the first. And then, but you're saying that 80 percentile is 5.3 across the city?
Yes.
Not for that area.
No, for across the city.
Would it not, would that area not usually have a higher cap rate in that area?
If you have two properties that have the, if you have two properties that are exactly the same, that one might have a higher cap rate than an area, a property in a different area. But if you're comparing, Notre Dame with Jarvis or the North End or any of those, our evidence has shown that, it's taken it into consideration when it's calculated it, so I don't feel that necessarily that it needs an extra bump.
Looking at the CBRE rate, they're going 5.5 to 6. I mean, they're saying the rough ones should be around 6, and the other ones are around 5.5. even 5.75 to 6 on the low-rise B. Would this be a B or an A? This would probably be a B, right, because of the area?
Um,
And looking at the rent?
if that's all your perspective.
What's your perspective?
My perspective is that the model has come up with 5.3%, and the model takes these things into consideration when we add the characteristics into the model.
But the model shows a high of 7.3,
Yes.
and yet you're not showing any 7.3s in your 80 percentile.
Well,
You're not even showing any in the 20th percent. Like,
it's not very common for them to be that high. That's our outliers. That's the ones that we do have properties that have very high cap rates.
yeah, and where would they
And-
be?
I don't have that information with me. What I know is that the majority of our properties are properties that are, 80% of them are 5.3 and lower.
On your page 5, you've got your properties that you say are multifamily. Third box is down. 191 Roach, you got it at 4.84. Did you do the review on this? Come up with that 484?
I didn't do all the math, but I did look at it, and I was involved in a review of the calculations that were done for that property, for all of these, actually.
Was this property remodeled at all, or was it
I can't remember.
394 Talbot? What condition was it in?
Sorry, I was looking at the income, and I was looking at the sale price. I didn't review the entire building, I was reviewing the math.
Would it not have made a difference if it was in rougher condition, was being bought to renovate?
It depends at what level of renovation was being planned, and it depends if the owner actually said that that was the intention, whereas we frequently have properties change hands that one would think would require renovation, but people decide that they get it at a cheap price and they're gonna make their money and sell it. So it's not fair for me to assume that people are going to be renovating things if they don't inform me that they're going to be renovating things.
Okay, on with your rebuttal.
Okay. It's hopefully enough there for all the files. Everybody's got the document there?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So, everybody has probably already seen this once or twice this fall, so I'll keep it brief. The rebuttal is with regard to this, the City of Winnipeg's multifamily sales on page number 5, the 4 of them in that chart. The City of Winnipeg is a member of the IAAO, the International Assessing,
We know what it is.
you know what it is, right? Okay, let's skip on that. As part of their guidelines, there's reviews that need to be done on sales to be included in their ratio studies. They need to meet certain guidelines in order to be included in the ratio studies. One of those guidelines is such that if properties are purchased with the intent to renovate or are then renovated immediately afterwards or shortly thereafter, and the return and the revenue stream for that property is significantly altered, then those properties do not meet the IAAO standards and should not be included in the ratio studies. The documents of the IAAO itself state that. The rebuttal evidence that you have here is again with regard to those 4 properties, actually the first 3 properties, 191 Roche, 394 Talbot, and 285 Maxwell. Now, the information included in the rebuttal document is publicly available information. We did not represent these particular clients, but we have gathered the information and have included it here today, as it's important to note that these properties don't meet those particular guidelines and should not be included in the ratio study of the city of Winnipeg. So we're looking at 4 properties here in the study. 3 of those do not meet the guidelines. As we're all aware, there certainly in recent past, and certainly in the time frame of the valuation date, a lot of multifamily properties were purchased for the intent to renovate and were then renovated. So they were not purchased on the basis of the in-place income and expense, so there was no direct capitalization rate to be developed from that, as they were not buying the in-place income. They were buying the revenue stream that they would have once they had renovated the properties and adjusted the rents upwards. So the documents that I've provided here support that. 191 Roche, this is the first page. Inside the cover page, they state that they had purchased it with the intent to renovate, to do suite upgrades. In their sale questionnaire that they returned to the city itself. So the city was aware of that one. Following that, you have the relatively low rental rates that they were charging at the time of purchase. So you can see that it was on the low end, and they subsequently renovated and increased the rental rates on that property. Following that, you have the second property, 394 Talbot. And if you read through, again, the email that's provided there, this is from the property management firm that handles that particular property. You can see that the intent of the purchaser upon purchase was to renovate the property. If you flip to the page after that, again, you can see that the rents were relatively low, $537 a month for 1 bedroom, $653 for a 2-bedroom. The page following that, following renovation, it says totally renovated, including new kitchens and bathrooms, window blinds, refinished hardwoods, etc. You have your 1 bedrooms at $800 and 2 bedrooms at $900. And then the following pages are with regard to 285 Maxwell. And again, this is from the property management firm that handles that property. You can see that the property was purchased with the intent to renovate, and they are increasing the rents over a 3-year period. Following that, you can see the relatively low rents upon purchase. So that is the rebuttal evidence, and the point of all of that is to point out that if these sales are included in the ratio study, how many other are there that are included in the ratio study, and essentially are skewing the city's model downwards, lower, because of the inclusion of these particular type of sales. And that is my evidence. Thank you.
Do you have questions on the rebuttal?
Yes. Where do you find the information on this from the IAAO standards?
Where do I find the information? Online on the IAAO webpage itself. I printed out their ratio study document, as well as a second one, which was with regard specifically to sales verification, I believe it was called.
Do you have the full document here?
No, but I presented it to this particular panel in the past in this cycle, so
Okay.
it's not included in the rebuttal evidence today.
Is part of that document that discuss the scope of the improvements?
I don't recall that particular text, but I believe that was mentioned. Now, The point of, the extent is, if you're renovating apartments with units and you're upgrading the, say, kitchens and bathrooms, those are the things that will drive higher rents, nicer floors, et cetera. And that takes the property out of, the governance under the rentals board, and they can receive above guideline rental increases because of that, which of course changes the return to the owner and would dramatically change the capitalization rate that
Okay.
would be developed from the property.
Would you say that 2% or 2.5% of a property's value would be a drastic or significant change to the property?
Again, it's more the effect on the rental rate, so if we knew what the change in rental rate was, then that would be more applicable, but
Okay.
the fact that it's renovated with the intent to purchase disqualifies it to start.
No, actually it doesn't. It's a significant renovation. And it's my opinion that our modelers adhere to the IAAO standards, because that's what is expected from the City of Winnipeg and our ISO guidelines. And we don't have the change in rent for 191 Roach, so we don't know what this $100,000 upgrades to this $3,725,000 property, what change that has influenced.
So with regard to that, so we're looking at a sale brochure that the new owner filled out at the time of purchase, and they, this is obviously not their, their business is apartments, not filling out forms. So they have to fill this out. They filled it out duly, put in suite upgrades, and made an estimate of what they spent. I don't think it's $100,000 that they spent. We don't actually know. It could have been considerably more than that.
It could have been considerably less. And we
But
don't know what, do you know what the change in the rents was?
I don't have that figure here today with us, but we do know that the intent was to change the income stream for the property.
Okay,
Which
but we don't
would-
know if that actually happened, so we don't know if this one should
No, we
be.
do know that.
taken out.
We do know that it happened.
Okay.
Can I ask any further questions,
Go ahead, we'll allow
or
one.
should we wait till the next property and just?
No,
do it
let's
again?
do it now so we don't have to do it on the next one.
Okay, so for the capitalization rates in the chart on page number 5,
Mhm.
the city obviously collects information on a wide number of properties, and look at the sale and make their calculations for the cap rates. Does the city look at whether those properties have subsequently been renovated following that? Do they go through the exercise of determining, has this property changed since the sale date? And I think I know the answer.
You know what? I am not involved in the process of doing the model, so I can't say what their process is.
Right.
I do know, however, that the information that is provided on the sales mailer, we look to see if it's a foreclosure, we look to see, on this particular one, a 2.6% change doesn't seem to be a significant one, and it still falls within IAAO guidelines, because that's not in my opinion, that's not a significant change.
So there's no follow-up done following they look at the information that they have, and they don't go out and look at any information as to whether that property was renovated and whether it should be included or not?
We do take looks. I can't say that each and every person that has ever done, because I can only talk about what I do.
Okay.
But
so-
as part of the IAO standards, we adhere to that's one of the things that we do, and we do have access to the permits that are taken out, and we do take looks at the permits as.
So there would be permits that would be taken out on all three of these properties then, if the city were to look at that information.
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
Did you have any further questions?
yes, I did.
Go ahead.
Is it fair to expect the city to know that there's going to be future renovations when they're bringing out emails dated September of 2019, when the ratio studies are expected to be done significantly before that date?
Well, that actually speaks to the point that I was just discussing. So when we're looking at our, the information that we include in our briefs and review of sales, we look at whether a property has been renovated following purchase or not. And if it has been renovated and the income stream has been changed, then that is not a property that was bought based on that in-place income. So the development of a cap rate out of that existing income at the time of sale is not appropriate. So yes, I would say that it is a fair expectation that the city would do their due diligence and examine whether these properties have been renovated post-sale as to the appellants.
Do you know the values of the renovations that were done on these other properties?
I do not.
So we don't know.
As I mentioned earlier, I'm not the agent that represents these
Okay.
particular properties.
I'd like to say that I feel that with the lack of information that we have here, that the properties that the city is using fall within IAA's standards. Thank you.
Robert, do you have any questions?
On the rebuttal? No, I
On the
don't.
rebuttal? Cynthia?
So, setting aside whether it meets standards or it doesn't, is it generally if a building is being purchased to renovate, does the cap rate tend to come in lower?
If the property is purchased for
Renovation?
It can be the case where it comes in lower. It's not always. And again, they're not basing their purchase price on what the net income from that property at that specific time frame. It's what is their return going to be once they've renovated the property. So they're willing to project what their rental stream is going to be upon renovation, what the cost of that renovation is going to be, and they base their purchase price upon the entire package.
So it could affect it based on something, a similar property that's not being purchased for the same intent, correct?
I'm sorry. I just
So a
wanna make sure I follow
similar
that.
property that was being purchased, but without the intent to renovate, the cap rates could be different just based on the fact that this one's being renovated and that one is not.
Absolutely, they
Yeah,
would be
okay.
generally significantly different.
Yes, okay, that was all I had, thank you.
I don't have anything, so on with your presentation, John.
Okay.
And we'll say that these questions on this can flow through all of the rest of the files, so we don't have to go through it again. Is that clear with everybody?
Absolutely.
That's good with you, Jennifer?
Yes, thank you.
That's good with the panel members? That's good. Let's move on.
All right, so 1585 Notre Dame Avenue. This is a Manitoba housing property. If you look at my page number 3, you can see some further detail. Property was originally built in 1958, and there's a total of 55 units, 12 one-beds and 43 two-beds. The purpose of Manitoba housing property, of course, is to provide low-income families and residents in Manitoba and Winnipeg with low-cost housing in the marketplace. Looking at the particular property, there was some minor renovation done to the property. My information was that it was a very, very small number of suites that received renovation. I can confirm that for the city as to the number that were done. Following hearing, if the city wishes, there's not an extensive renovation that taken place to property, to my knowledge, and we did inspect the property. If you look at the photographs, you can see again the institutional nature of the common areas, the hard-wearing surfaces, etc., concrete block, your tile flooring, much of it, at least everything that I saw, was original to the time frame, as well as the wood finishing, etc. Your cabinetry in the kitchen, again, dominantly original, with some new counters in some cases where required. Bathrooms are as shown there. This is a couple of different suites, so you can see the basic nature of the accommodations. Broken window and the one at the bottom of page number 9. Now, obviously location has a factor, is a significant factor with regard to market value. If you look at my page number 11, and you can see the location of the subject, it is indeed on Notre Dame Avenue. In that western area, it actually fronts right on Notre Dame with industrial properties adjacent to it on the other side of Notre Dame. This particular area is similar in nature to properties closer into the core. It's a lower income area with similar socioeconomic issues that, including obviously lower income, generally higher unemployment, etc. And this tends to drive some other issues that can have an impact on value. It's not the most desirable area to rent in necessarily, and obviously rental rates will be impacted by the area as well as the condition of the property. Now, moving forward to the market valuation itself, as Manitoba Housing, it's operated on a rent here to income basis, so there's no income to rely upon in making a fair estimation of market value. We did provide some CMHC stats looking at the city of Winnipeg's estimation of market rent for the subject property. And looking at both the location and the condition of the property, we felt that it was appropriate in this instance for the subject. And so we have relied on that same $728 average rental rate that the city is using for their valuation. Comes to $480,216. Just for reference sake, the actual income brought in from rent was $220,937 in the reference period. But that is, of course, rent fair to income, so we're not relying upon that. The vacancy for the subject property, we are using 3%, which I believe is the same as the city. You can see the market stats are in support of that on page number 15. And we have gone through a 3-year stabilization exercise on the operating expenses for the property. If you look at the bottom of page number 15, you can see the 3-year history and how we have stabilized that for the valuation date. It comes to $269,062, which is slightly lower than what the city has projected. We can move on from there to capitalization rate. As most of our properties today are Manitoba Housing, social housing, I will go through this text once, and it can carry forward for the balance of our properties here today, with the exception of the one market apartment. Looking at social housing, the social and affordable housing cannot legitimately be directly compared to standard market apartment transactions, as social housing properties have considerable restrictions and burdens that are not present for market apartments.
What page are you reading?
I'm on page number 16 at the top there, Mr.
16?
Yeah, 16. We've moved on to the capitalization rate section. So if you look at that first paragraph, The, as I was mentioning, there's rental income restrictions, rental market restrictions, generally additional operating expenses with public housing, social housing. Physical condition tends to be below average in comparison to the standard market apartment. And then you have disposition restrictions as well upon any sale. There's a recognized expert in this field, Mr. Richard Polton, who's an accredited appraiser in the United States. He's written a book on the topic, Valuation and Market Studies for Affordable Housing, in which he states, developing a market-derived cap rate for an income-restricted property begins with an analysis of the available rates for similar unrestricted properties. Then these rates are adjusted based on the risk factors that an investor would consider in developing a cap rate. The result is a capitalization rate based on market factors and associated risks. In the final analysis, property tax assessment must take into account the public purpose of the project, the overall benefits and burdens, and the restricted nature of the operating rents. So, the point of all of that is, when you're looking at an appropriate cap rate for social and affordable housing, typically, again, it's not directly comparable to market transactions, and there are other risks factors that need to be taken into account, which is generally going to drive a higher cap rate. Moving on, we've presented our own capitalization rate study in the middle of page number 16. These were properties that were purchased for the in-place income at the time of sale, so there was no further renovation and increase in rents and increase in return to the investors. These properties were purchased based on the in-place net operating income. So the cap rates are true cap rates as of that time. We're looking at a low of 5.44 for the most modern property built in 2006, also the largest. This was purchased by a very astute national level investor here in Winnipeg, in South St. Patel, 333 Ward, at a cap rate of 5.44%. And then obviously there's a number of others on the chart, up to a high of 6.65% for property trading in 2018. Now, the main market participants are essentially showing a flat line with regard to capitalization rates over the last two cycles. If you look at the Collier's cap rate report for 2016 and 2018, as shown on my page number 17 rather, you can see that they're showing low-rise apartments between 5.25% and 6%, and 5% and 6% in the 2016 and 2018 timeframe. CB Richard Ellis, as noted earlier, we're looking at low-rise B properties, flat line between 5.75% and 6% in both 2016 and 2018. The studies or the information that are put out by these two brokerages are based on investment grade properties and typically are representative of the upper end of the market and the range that would be paid for an investment grade property. The subject property and most of these that we're looking at today would not fall within that particular range, and if they did, they would be at the absolute upper end of that range. So we have an older property with significantly dated units located directly on Notre Dame, across from industrial in a lower socioeconomic area. We have used a cap rate of 6.25%. And this gives us our final market value of $3,148,000. The addendum materials in my report include the income and expense information, the two Colliers and CB Richard Ellis reports as mentioned, And then we have supportive decisions from the 2020 Board of Revision on similar properties, many of them also Manitoba housing properties with cap rates ranging between 6%, 6.25%, and 6% with regard to the decisions. There are a couple that are also not Manitoba housing within that addenda. Thank you, and I'm open for questions.
Questions?
Yes. I'm curious, $150,000 renovation on a $3+ million property is a minor renovation which should not impact the value, and yet a $100,000 renovation on a $3,725,000 property is significant and should be taken into account when regards to a property that you're using for a cap rate analysis. How do we
What are we
justify that?
referring to? I'm sorry, I don't have that information in front of me.
In your rebuttal evidence, it shows that there's $100,000 renovation on a property that you're using that we're using as cap rate, and it should be removed from consideration because there was $100,000 renovation plan. But this property had a $150,000 permit taken out for renovation, and you said that that was a minor renovation which should not impact the value.
Well, I don't know the total amount that was spent on the renovation and whether, as I mentioned, with regard to any suite upgrades, it was a very, very select number of suites that received any upgrades. So perhaps, as you mentioned, it's electrical things or things of that nature that are not directly correlated to any increase in rent if you're not renovating the units themselves.
Okay. On your page 16. How would a foreclosure sale affect one of the properties that you're using for cap rate study?
How would a foreclosure affect?
If a property is sold in foreclosure, should it be used for a cap rate study, or is that something that perhaps might nullify a property as for use for cap rate study?
Certainly that would be one that we would typically take out. To my knowledge, the detailed work has been done with regard to reviewing the information on these properties at the time. If there's other information, I would certainly like to make any corrections that are needed.
I'd like to say that perhaps we should take out 430 Young, as it was a foreclosure sale. I do have the information that I have access to about it. The MLS listing shows that it was listed in August of 2015 for $1,050,000, and that the income and expense mailers at the time were that it was vacant, and that there's permits that were out that were told to hold as they're trying to get it from the bank because it was a bankruptcy sale.
Okay, I'd certainly like to see the detail and confirm the timeframes, because our information as of the sale date that was provided is that there was income and expense to be relied upon in the purchase of that property. But again, we want to be accurate, so if there's other information, I would certainly like to review it.
I'll give that to you. Would you like to have the information?
I can collect it from you at the
Okay.
end.
That's okay. He can get it from me at the end.
So
Yeah.
That's,
at the end.
yeah. Okay. That's all my questions. Thank you.
Robert?
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Cynthia?
Just one, so on your page 17 and 18, the Collier study is coming in multifamily 5.25 to a high of 6, and then on CBRE Winnipeg's coming in 5.75 to 6, and you've gone 6.25 on this building?
That's correct.
And
What?
why, well, you've gone higher than, no, I know your study here goes to 6.65, but you put these in here and you've gone above that, so.
I have, yes. So, again, just going back to the cap rate selection, so we're looking at social housing here. It's not that because it's social housing it needs a higher cap rate, it's because of the issues surrounding social housing. It's older units, it's more wear and tear. Typically they're in lesser areas, such as certainly the subject is in that particular western area fronting on Notre Dame. You have issues upon disposition. You have tenants that are in place on a particular rental structure, and they have the legal right to carry forward in the units upon sale for the period of their lease, et cetera. So often there's a lot of deferred maintenance in these properties. If you look at the photos, you can see what we're looking at. I gather there were some permits that were taken out on the property, so there's a lot more hair on deals like this than there is in a standard market apartment. So I've made a slight adjustment to the top end of that 6% range. Now, I'm not basing my cap rate on Collier's and
Just on those, I know,
CDH
but you do
ballots,
have them in your package, so
That's right, yeah.
Okay, that's all I had, thanks.
So you're basing it more on your walkthrough of the house, the apartment buildings?
Walk through and, yes, our knowledge of the market.
And on your walkthrough, were any of the suites actually renovated?
There were a couple that were renovated, and we were not able to see those. There's 120 or 130 of these particular properties that we had to see in a very compressed time frame. So putting notices out to tenants was challenging. So we saw as many units as we could, but I did not see the individual renovated units. Housing does a decent job of renovating them, but again, they do them in their manner with hard-wearing, long-lasting surfaces. It's not a...
Well, the city's given information on what they see has been done by the work permits, but like, things like the windows, I haven't heard anything about windows being done in the building, have they?
I do not recall
That
the
wasn't
windows
listed on
having
this
been
one.
changed.
And you wouldn't have noticed when you were walking through
Particular,
it?
I generally would have, and yeah, to my recollection, I do not recall any new windows having been put in place. I think if you look at the exterior at the top of page 4, you can see that that's the case. And these were taken this summer.
My next question, see? I'm good. Anything in summation?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Let's move on to the next file, which should be a little bit quicker this time. The next file will be 500 Waterfront Drive. If you could read the file number as well, just in case.
Oh, okay, sure. This is file number 19-487. Roll number 13099068050. The assessed value is $12,420,000. This is an apartment building, 2 buildings, 2 to 4 stories. It was built between 2013 and 2015 with 64 suites and 60 outdoor parking spots. On page 2, we have the income value summary. There are 18 one-bedroom suites and 46 two-bedroom suites. Average monthly rent per unit is $1,363.66. The class and liability of this property is 20T. Vacancy rate is 3%. The expense rate is 38.87% with a capitalization rate of 5%. giving us the 12,420,000. There are comparables on page 3. We do have income information on page 7 and 8. And we have pictures on page 11. This is right on waterfront. Thank you.
Questions, Trevor?
Just one really, I guess, looking at the lease comparables on page 3, is it fair to say that these would all be significantly better located and nicer than the subject property?
I haven't been in any of the properties, so I'm not sure that I would say that they are nicer.
Okay.
These are all built, 70 Bison Drive was built 2013
Okay.
and has rents of 1,546, so I would guess that it's a nice apartment.
Okay, and again, I recognize you don't have time
Yeah.
to inspect these or anything, but.
But I would say that the rent reflects nice apartments.
Okay,
Mhm.
I have to ask some follow-up questions now, unfortunately.
Okay.
336 Ward, located in South St. Patel.
Mhm.
This is a 50-plus luxury apartment, underground parking, granite kitchen, stainless appliances, etc. And I know that
I have no idea.
you're not familiar with it, so please bear with me in asking questions that can't be answered. That's actually 86 Niagara, my mistake. I had labeled it incorrectly. 70 Bison Drive, I actually handle this property, also higher end underground parking, a lounge, gym, in-store laundry, or in-suite laundry, pardon me. 2390 McPhillips also has a gym, in-suite laundry, nicer furnishings, etc.
Mhm.
Those are all of my questions.
Cynthia, any questions?
On their mailer on page 7, in the total income there, is that would be including parking?
I'm not sure if they are including parking in that or not.
Okay. Maybe I can ask Mr. Smith that when we get there then. And your cap at 5, that's based on the age of the building, I'm assuming? Would that area come into play there at all?
Of course, it comes into play.
Because
But
it's low, so.
we don't pick one feature to influence the cap rate. It's a variety of features that influence and move it upwards and downwards as is applicable. And that's why this one came out at 5. But the area is taken into account with every property that we do.
Okay, that's all I had, thanks.
Did I ask you already, Robert? I asked you if you had
No,
questions?
you didn't ask
Do you have
yet.
questions, Robert?
Yeah,
missed you last
Waterfront
time.
Drive, is this backing on the river?
It's
On the
across the street from the river. If you look at the picture, that big field, the river is on,
Oh, I see.
yeah, over by the number 11.
So there's nothing on the other side of the street, no development?
Called Juba Park.
Yeah, there's a park there.
Okay, Cuba Park.
There's, I can't remember where the hotel is, but there's the hotel right there with the SIBO.
Yeah, it's a boutique hotel of some kind, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And would you say of your comparables, 86 Niagara with a mix of suites would be the most comparable? Not that you rely on one, but it looks to be the mix of suites that,
Well, but apparently it's a luxury seniors complex, so I'm not sure that that is the
86
most
Niagara is?
comparable. That's what Trevor said.
I thought he said Ward was a luxury.
I was mistaken, it's 86 Niagara. I've got an arrow pointing me to the
Okay,
property.
that's why I was confused on that, okay.
I'm not sure, I worked hard to find comparables that had a similar mix of suites. They're never identical, but with significantly more two-bedroom
Two-bedroom,
suites
yeah.
than one-bedrooms, and with similar size.
Okay, okay, thank you.
The sheets they sent you were showing the rents on one bedrooms at 11 and two bedrooms at 12.50. Were you charging the same rent right across the board on this one?
No, we didn't,
You didn't differentiate?
no, we differentiated, but this is just an average per unit.
Here's the model.
Mine's the model, and we don't say that this is, like, it's not each suite gets this amount, that's the average. Like, once we figure out the income from the suite mix, then we just take that total and divide it by the total number of units. So that's the average, it's not actually what we apply to each of the suites.
1363 is your average.
Yes.
On with your presentation. Oh, no, I got one more question.
Okay.
Why do you include a board order in here? What's on this board order? This is on what is the one on Bison?
This is, yes, this is the one on Bison. This is one that Trevor and this is one that with very similar details and similar issues, and with dealing with a similar person, it was confirmed,
This is the 70 Bison Drive.
yes.
So you think 70 Bison Drive is very comparable to this place?
I think if you look at 70 Bison Drive, there are similarities. It does have more area per square foot so it does have a higher rent. But I think that if you take all the factors into consideration, that it was built in a similar time frame. It's got a similar suite mix with the one-bedroom units compared to the two-bedroom units, and that it's a 4-story, where the subject property is 2 to 4-story. So I do think that that's a very comparable property. And I think that the cap rate of 5 is reflective of this property.
Do you think that they've got sort of a captive audience at Bison Drive compared to?
Well, I think that Waterfront would have a very captive audience as well. There's a lot of people downtown that want to come, they want to live close to where they work because it's cost prohibitive to be commuting all the time. And I think that they do have, there's the plus and the minus of the area. There's the negative factors of the socioeconomic grouping of very similar to the area, but then we've got all of these apartments coming in which are commanding high rents because there's a high demand for people that want to live close to where they work.
Here's average monthly. It's just not right. On with you, Trevor.
Okay, just to deal with that particular decision, and I certainly respect the city's right to include board of revision decisions. That particular decision has been appealed to the municipal board and is awaiting scheduling, I believe, as are the years prior to that as well. And we anxiously await time frame to do that. We have a number of other properties that are newly built or very recently built that did have decisions that were ruled in our favor in suburban locations. Moving on to the subject property, location is a critical piece in valuation, and certainly comes into play in many factors here. If we look at, let's look at my page 11 to start with. I highlighted where 500 Waterfront Drive is located with the little red dot. If you look at the East Exchange And where the typical development has happened, if you look at that lower roundabout, that right around that roundabout just to the north, heading up to, I guess Pacific would be the cross street. That's essentially the end of where you see the residential development. There are a couple of others that are not between Pacific and the subject, but after the subject that are struggling mightily. There's that spaceship condo that you see from the Disraeli Freeway as you go over top. That has struggled for years. There's a couple of other smaller developments that are just to the north of the subject that also have some issues. The area that is in demand is south of this. This is in the area where the older industrial buildings are located. It is certainly less desirable, less attractive. There are more issues that occur here. It is essentially across from the Alexander Docks. Now, yes, the Mir Hotel has been built there, but we also have lots of other activities that have occurred there in the past and certainly do continue. There was and I was just looking at the news before I came here. There was a murder back in 2015 in that particular area of a gentleman who was homeless. Unfortunately, the Tina Fontaine murder, I don't know that it necessarily occurred there, but her body was found at the Alexander Docks. I'm not saying that this is murder central, just that this is not your average location for a multifamily residential. Certainly not Bison Drive or 333 Ward, etc. So if we look at that issue, that is where it is located. There's a bit of text with regard to that issue at the top of page number 11. The subject itself has experienced significant vandalism, theft, and property damage. In fact, I'll get you to turn to my page number 10, which is the site description. They had an individual who had stolen a vehicle, who took it on a joyride, who drove through the grassy area between the two buildings and took out the hydro tower that's there. So they've had, that has occurred. They've had to put in bollards and various other things. Parking is an ongoing issue with regard to break-in to vehicles in that particular location, simply because of where it's located. The ease of access is there for that particular activity. Let's move back and look at the property itself. So it is relatively newly built, 2013 and 2015, representing the two individual buildings. We have a total of 64 units. And we can see the build-out of the property itself in the photos as we go forward. It is elevated, there is on-site parking, no underground parking, there's no in-suite laundry. The units themselves, while nice, representative of new construction, they don't have any of the deluxe features that one would see in many of the comparables that we'll look at here today. So you can see the finish in the bathroom and the kitchen and the balcony, etc. There is laundry on site, but not in each individual unit. So let's move on to the valuation. The rents for the property were $1,100 for one beds, 14 of those, and $1,250 for the two beds. Now, are these at market? What we've provided on page number 13, stretching onto page number 14 there, is market comparables for newly or very recently constructed apartments in Winnipeg and their rental rates, as well as a bit of description with regard to the build-out of those. Typically, these properties are better located than the subject, and they tend to have higher levels of finish as well. So the subject property, if you look at the stats at the bottom of the chart, we have 1 bedrooms with a low of 1,048, an average of 1,239. Subject is at 1,150, certainly appropriate. The 2 beds, a low of 1,298 and an average of 1,582. The subject is slightly below that. I certainly don't see that is below what market would be for the subject. I think it's fair to say if they could achieve more rent, they would have set the rents higher, and would be generating that. So we believe the in-place rents are fair and equitable in the marketplace, and indeed, if you were to buy the property at the valuation date, this is the income stream that you would receive. There's no real potential to upgrade this property as it's newly built, so you're not going to increase the revenue. We've included parking for the property as well in our valuation. Moving on to the expense side of the equation, page number 16. We've used a vacancy rate of 2% in our analysis. Looking at the single year of 2017, it was ever so slightly under 2%, but obviously that varies, so we've gone with 2% for the subject. The property was finished building in 2015. The first year of fully stabilized expenses would be 2017, so that is all that we've relied on in establishing our expenses. So if you look at the expenses, they're shown on page number 16, and they come to $375,657. That's a full year of occupancy for both properties. Moving on to capitalization rate. I'm not going to go through our individual cap rates again. Let's look at the subject property in comparison to the marketplace. So we have Colliers and C.B. Richard Ellis giving us essentially ranges of 5 to 6 and 5.5 to 6% for investment grade properties. Now, this is a newly built property, I recognize that, it's in good condition. There won't be deferred maintenance, etc. However, balancing that, it is located where it is. They're going to drive lower rent. They're going to have more turnover. They're going to have more vandalism, theft issues such as that. So if you look at the sales transactions that have occurred, we're essentially looking at a base of 5.5% in the marketplace. Now, should this get more than that in terms of having a higher capitalization rate? Potentially, but in terms of arriving at a fair market value, we have used a cap rate of 5.5%. Certainly I don't see this particular property being capped any lower than that by astute investors in the marketplace. So this gives us our final market value of $10,225,000, and that's summarized on page number 20. And that is my presentation. Thank you.
Question?
Yes, so the vacancy rate, the actual vacancy is less than 2%. So the area is not so bad that it's causing a vacancy issue?
So two things, yes, it is, because in their lease-up time frame, they had considerable moving in and out, which was higher than the 2%. And the 2% that we're looking at for that year is a single point in time. I do not believe that they have carried forward at that rate. So they were essentially at 2%, and as you know, we do have to allow for vacancy, and I think I've assigned a lower vacancy than the city.
I was just asking in regards to the neighborhood, that it's not a property that has a consistent vacancy issue due to the the terrible, terrible area that they're in.
Well, we're looking at a single year income and expense on which to base that, so I don't think that's a fair portrayal of the property necessarily.
Okay, thank you.
Cynthia?
So I'm just confirming on your workup on page 20, so you've used the actual rents there, correct? And that's an average?
That is correct, yes.
Okay.
If you look at, yes, the breakout is shown on page number 15, if you want to see it there.
Yeah, okay, that's all I had, thank you.
Robert?
Yes, I thought, on the workup from the owner, it says 918,000 is the gross income. You're slightly higher than that, 938, so yours is an averaging.
It's the full occupancy, so as we're looking at establishing market value here, they've reported what they achieved in that year. They had 916. If they were fully occupied, they'd get 934,800.
Okay, that's fine, thank you.
And I've got no further questions. Move on to the next. The next property will be 331 Blake. When you are ready, Jennifer?
No, that one was withdrawn.
Hmm? Oh, where did that come from?
I think it's that stuff.
Sorry, it showed up on my docket.
Oh dear.
I'll pretend it wasn't there?
Yeah.
Okay,
There you go. That's the next one.
I've got the next one here. Yeah, okay, that works. Sorry about that, it was there. 24 Carlton Street. Guess I should read this, huh? When you're ready.
This is file number 19-1641, roll number 12092634100. The assessed value is $4,057,000. Its classification is 20, residential 2, and the liability status is grantable. It's an apartment building, 10 stories, it was built in 1970 with 65 suites and 8 outdoor parking spots. The income value summary, we have 64 bachelor suites and 1 2-bedroom suite. The average monthly rent per unit is $641.78. We have 3% vacancy, 55.72% expense rate, and a 5.3 capitalization rate, which gives us the $4,057,000. There's some comparables, and the cap rate information, the excerpts from the act, and we have the income statement. And on page 9, there is a picture and a little map. So if you're looking at the map, if you're coming up from the bottom corner, you see the building with the number 30, and then beside it is the building with the number 24. That's the property that we're discussing. Thank you.
Questions, Trevor?
All model driven?
Yes.
Those are my questions. Thank you.
Cynthia?
No, I think I'm good, thank you.
Robert?
Good right now, thank you.
On with your presentation, please, Trevor.
All right, number 24 Carlton Street, we're back to Manitoba Housing property here. The subject property, built in 1970, as with many Manitoba housing properties, there's a very, very high degree of bachelor units. If you look at the chart on page number 3 of my brief there, you can see that we're looking at a total of 64 out of 65 units being bachelor units, with 1 2-bedroom unit, which is, I'm sure, the caretaker for the property itself. Again, it's Manitoba Housing. We can move forward and look at the build-out of the property itself. Starting on page 4, you've got some exteriors. And then we get into the units themselves on page number 5. So this unit, or rather this property, has not been refreshed. You can see the condition of the flooring, walls, baseboards, original cabinetry, same in the bathroom as well, except where required to be replaced. We're essentially looking at a property that has not changed since that time. So that is the basic nature of the property itself. So while it is located south of Broadway, that is the build-out of the subject. So page number 10 will give you an idea of where it's located from the aerial. And we can move on to the valuation side. So in looking at the subject property and looking at fair market rent for it, we have provided you with Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation 2017 rental market report with their averages of rent for the individual property types. So subject property is located in the Centennial area. And it is in the condition that it's in. If you look at the top of my page number 13, we have the stats for the Centennial area versus the Winnipeg CMA as a whole. So Centennial, it's indicating bachelors had an average of $650, and 2 bedrooms had an average of $1,038. Slightly below Winnipeg CMA average at $655 for the bachelors. Now, the subject itself would be in below average condition. So in looking for a fair rental value for this, we've used the CMHC averages less 5% for size, condition, and finishing of those units. So this gives us an annual gross rental income of $486,073, which comes out to $623 per month on average. And again, we're looking at 64 out of 65 units being bachelors. The actual revenue collected was $210,126 for the property. Now, moving on to vacancy, we provide the vacancy stats at the top of page number 14. We're looking at 98.5% of the units being bachelor units. Vacancy rate in bachelor units was 3.3%. At the relevant time frame, we've assigned a vacancy rate of 3% in our analysis. The expense allowance, as usual, we've done the three-year stabilization in order to arrive at a fair estimation of stabilized expense allowance for the subject. You can see that at the bottom of page 14 using the actuals. And we come to an expense allowance of $282,645 based on the in-place, the actual expenses over the prior 3-year time horizon. From there, we can move on to capitalization rate, and I'll just take you forward maybe at this time to page number 18. And you can see the summary of our valuation. One thing I didn't mention is the subject property has a roof lease revenue. We have included this amount in our valuation following deduction for vacancy, so you can see that it's included in the effective gross income. So we come to effective gross income of $483,568 with that included. The expense allowance, $283,249, gives us an NOI of $200,319. Capitalization rate. Now, the subject property is is dominantly bachelors, 64 out of 65. It certainly has some deferred maintenance, et cetera. Balancing that, it is located in that Assiniboine to Broadway stretch, so it certainly a superior location to some of the other properties that we have looked at and will look at here today. So we have used a cap rate of 6% for the subject property. Again, I'm being conservative here. I would hate to see a cap rate less than 6% get applied to the subject. Perhaps I could have been higher, but I did take into account the location of the property and coming up with the 6% cap rate that's applied. So this gives us our final market value of $3,339,000.
Questions, Jennifer?
No, thank you.
Cynthia?
Just sort of interest sake, I know with Manitoba Housing, bachelor apartments don't have a lot of vacancy, but if this was, the building was sold and it went into private hands and it wasn't a Manitoba Housing, are bachelor apartments more difficult to rent generally? I know they aren't with the Manitoba Housing property, but I'm just wondering with others.
On the open market?
Yeah.
So I'm just looking at my page number 14 here with regard to the CMHC stats. So in that particular area at that time frame, there was 3.3% average vacancy for bachelor units. Typically, there's more demand for one beds than there is for bachelors, but they're close in nature. I'd say arguably there's more vacancy for bachelors, as you don't have that, separation of sleeping area from
Yeah,
from
that's
living
why.
area.
Yeah, sorry, I missed that was there. I could have looked it up myself. Thank you. Okay, that's all I had. Thank you.
Bob?
Yeah, when you look at your expenses on page 14, you've used an expense amount of $283,000 stabilized, and that includes a 5% management fee
That's correct.
of $23,000. So if you take off that 23, for example, you'd be close down to where the city is. Eh? Well, no, you'd be lower than the city. So
Right.
that seems to be a major difference between your expenses and those of the
It
city.
is indeed. And the point of including that is that Manitoba Housing does not have a property management fee for their properties because they obviously take care of them themselves and they're a social housing organization. They don't charge a management fee and there's no return. So what we're doing in coming up with a fair market value is looking at the property as how would this trade on the market and how would it be operated? So you have to include a property management fee, and 5% of effective gross income is essentially a market standard for property management. So we're simply balancing it out. We're not adding on additional expense that's not appropriate. We're just taking it to market level.
So you're very close on the gross income, but your difference is on the expenses.
Yes.
And
well,
of course, the cap rate.
The gross income, I mean, we get there because they have a roof lease essentially in terms of being close on the effective gross income. If they weren't located where they are, they would not have that. And as tall as they are, they wouldn't have that roof lease. And it could move to another tower potentially as well, which would alter their income stream. But because it's there, we have included it in the value.
Okay, thank you.
And I've got no questions. Thank you. That concludes that matter. The next item, number 7, is going to be adjourned. So if you want to pass the papers down on it, we'll give it to the secretary. Number 7. We'll move on to item 8, which will be
See what
for
yeah.
the whole thing.
The whole thing?
Yep, you don't need it
Okay.
before we write on it. What's that?
That's number 8 for.
Oh, this is your number 8, you'll need that.
Okay.
Now we'll deal with 420 Edmonton, when you're ready.
This is file number 19-1666, roll number 13052986000. 420 Edmonton Street, the assessed value is $6,222,000. Classification is 20, residential 2, liability status is grantable. This is an apartment building, 17 stories, built in 1978 with 88 suites and 20 outdoor parking spots. On page number 2, we have the income value summary. We have 64 bachelor suites and 24 two-bedroom suites. There's an average monthly rent per unit at $695.48. We've applied a 3% vacancy rate, 56.33% expense rate, and a 5% capitalization rate, giving it a value of $6,222,000. There's some rent comparables on page 3. And then if we look on page 9, there's the building right there. It looks like it's off of the square because it's because of its height. But at the bottom there with 420 and 424 on it, that's the property that we're talking about. Thank you.
Questions? Trevor?
No, I have no questions.
Cynthia?
The cap rate on the age of this, but again, the model is taking all that into account, the location, yeah, okay, that's all I have.
Robert?
I don't think I have any, thank you.
I've got nothing. On with your presentation, please.
Okay. I didn't ask this question, but I think the city's model, I would guess that age has a significant contributing factor with regard to the capitalization rate that is used, because if you look at the location of the subject property and the fact that 3/4 or 2/3 of the property is bachelor units located right on Central Park, I think you would struggle mightily to come up with an astute investor that would pay 5% for a property such as this. So looking at the subject property itself, built in 1978, we have different unit breakdown, and again, this is from the on-site property manager. The total number of bachelors is 65 units, and the total number of two beds is 23 units for a total of 88 units in all. We're looking at Manitoba housing property again. And we can move into the photographs of the property beginning on page number 4. So you can see the exterior at the top of page 4, taken from Central Park itself. Circulation area on page 4 with the hard-wearing surfaces, and then you get into the units themselves, and you can see the dominantly original cabinetry, original flooring, etc. More, again, it's very, very common for Manitoba housing properties to have a greater degree of wear and tear in them than in your standard market apartments. And they don't necessarily have a budget on an annual basis to repair things, so you end up with properties that have significant wear and tear as shown in the photos. Now let's look at the location. So page number 9 gives you the aerial. It's too bad this isn't slightly closer, but you can see that the property is located directly across from Central Park. So this particular area has a high high number of apartment buildings surrounding it, which is fine. It is a lower socioeconomic area. Typically, what you'll find is a lot of Manitoba housing in this particular area and lower rent apartments. There is a lot of new Canadians and recent immigrants that are guided into housing in this particular area with lower incomes. You end up, unfortunately, with the socioeconomic issues that areas like this face, there is a lot of drug activity that one will find evidence of on the streets, etc. In that particular area. So that's simply the area that we're looking at, and that should be taken into account in the final market analysis of such a property. Looking at the actual valuation, we've seen the interior of the units. Subject property would be well below average in my estimation in terms of the condition of the units and the deferred maintenance that's present. There has been no refresh to the property since its build date of 1978. So looking at our inspection of the property, we have used the market averages from CMHC less 10% for size, condition, and finishing of the units. The units are certainly on the small side in comparison to the marketplace. This gives us an average of $714 per month. You can see the breakdown on page number 12 as to how that is arrived at. The actual revenue collected was just under $318,000 for that same time frame. We have used 3% vacancy rate based on the market statistics, and our expense allowance is again based on the actual performance of the property over the past 3 years and the stabilization that we have done for the property. So we have reduced the repair and maintenance for this particular property as it was on the high side, reflective of what needed to be repaired, but we've reduced it to a market average.
That was the expenses you said?
That was the expenses for repair and maintenance, yes. My apologies there. We're looking at the chart on page number 13.
Yeah.
Moving on to capitalization rate for the subject property. So again, we're looking at Manitoba housing property in a location right in that Central Park area. Large degree of bachelor units, which are less attractive on the marketplace, certainly drive less revenue. And we have all of the other issues that have been discussed here today. Looking at the subject and all of these factors combined, we've used a cap rate of 6.25%. Again, I'm trying to be conservative in using the cap rates that I'm using. I could have been higher at 6.5%. I think that the value that comes out of this is appropriate, and I think a premium to that upper end of 6% is more than fair at 6.25%. So this gives us our final market value of $4,991,000 based on that material. And you can see our valuation summarized on page 17 versus the cities. Thank you.
Jennifer?
No, thank you.
Cynthia?
No, I have no questions.
Robert?
Yeah, on the previous property on Carlton Street, you asked for a 6% cap rate,
I did, yes.
and this is 6.25. Do you
That's
consider
correct.
this a poor area, or?
I would consider it a lower area, yes, in terms of valuation.
The building's slightly newer, so the age factor is,
Irrelevant, essentially. If you look at the
Okay.
condition of it, this one would be in slightly better condition than the other one. The other one is much better located.
And this is below average, and below the condition of the previous one?
It is, yes.
So you've inspected both of these?
Yes.
Okay. And so you consider it a high crime area?
Yes.
We don't like to word it that way, but
Well, that's
Unfortunately,
the way it
yes. I'm just stating facts,
This
essentially.
building has been subject to some issues on crime.
Well, it's the general area that it's located within, which obviously, has an impact on desirability and what rent you can achieve, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, thank you.
boy, could we get into a debate. We'll have a little debate after when it's over.
Okay, well, what?
Associate issues. On to the next property. I've got no questions on this one. I was just there on Saturday.
I went to an author speaking just around the corner from this at a church about 2 weeks ago.
I didn't see it. Anyway, let's move on to the next property, 444 Kennedy, Knox United.
Yes. That's where it was.
This is file number 19-1758, roll number 130-530-75100. The assessed value is $8,680,000. Classification is 20, liability status is grantable. This is an apartment building, 15 stories, built in 1972, with 142 suites and 15 parking spots. On page 2, we have the income value summary. Our numbers are that we've got 116 bachelor suites, 25 one-bedroom suites, and 1 two-bedroom suite, with an average monthly rent per unit at $680.52. The vacancy rate is 3%, the expense rate is 59.1, and the capitalization rate is 5.3. That gives us our $8,680,000. There are comparable rents on page 3, the rest of our standard information, and a picture on page 9. This is at the corner of Kennedy and Sargent, and you can see that the lot is somewhat oddly shaped. And that's it, thank you.
Questions, Trevor?
I have no questions.
Cynthia?
No, thank you.
Robert?
Had a chance to even look at it here.
Take your time.
Of course, it's all model again.
Yes.
And cap in here is 5.3. Okay, I think that's all right now, thank you.
Okay, on with your presentation, please, Trevor.
Okay, so 444 Kennedy, we have the same unit breakout, 116 bachelors, 25 one-beds, and 1 two-bed, for a total of 142. Property was built in 1972, and again, we're dealing with a Manitoba housing property here, operated on rent geared to income. So there's a bit of text on page number 4 with regard to the building improvements. Again, I'm just going to guide you to the size of the units here. We're looking at bachelor units that are 320 square feet in size. One bedrooms of 436 square feet. Property also has an admin office on the main floor, a security office, interview rooms. These are all Manitoba housing rooms that they use for intake, etc. Property itself, you can see photos on page number 5 and onwards. Again, relatively basic nature of the common areas. Page number 6, you can see the original design, and the photograph that's included here gives you one of the units where they had to replace the cabinetry due to damage. There has not been a refresh in the property. Does not all look like this, but that is the photos that we had available, I guess, to include. So it's dominantly original in nature to that 1972 timeframe. The location, as noted, mentioned, it's at the corner of Kennedy and Sargent, and again, it's essentially one block over from the last property that we were looking at in that Central Park area itself. If you look at the bottom of my page number 8, and across the back lane, that is a cooperative housing entity that has had very significant issues in maintaining any occupancy in it due to the unique layout of how it was designed and the drug issues that have cropped up in their courtyards, etc. That actually fronts right on Balmoral Street, that particular entity. So that's across the back lane from the subject. Now, moving on to valuation, again, we're looking at CMHC averages and what would the subject property lease for on the marketplace. Well, we have really small units, 320 square feet for your bachelor units, 436 for the one beds. So again, most of them are dominantly original, so we have used the averages less 10% in our valuation. And this gives us an average of $616 a month in rent, and you can see how that's done in the middle of page 13. Vacancy, we have used 3% for the subject property. Again, we're looking at 81.7% bachelor units in the property. And our expense stabilization is done at the bottom of page 13. We arrive at an expense amount of $577,661, having been stabilized. And we can move on to my page number 18, where we have the summary of our valuation versus the city's valuation. So our rental income is projected rent based on CMHC averages less a deduction is somewhat lower than the city's. Our expense allowance is also significantly lower than the city's based on the actuals. And we come to an NOI of $440,219. Now, we have used a cap rate of 6% for the subject property in coming up with our valuation here. We come to a market value of $7,337,000. And as we sit here today, I believe I made the adjustment due to a higher number of one-bedroom units being present in the subject property. We could certainly be at 6.25%. It's not a great deal different than the property next to it. And in fact, I think in looking at it, I might make that adjustment as we speak. It's obviously up to the board if you wish to take that, but if we make that adjustment, so 440, 219, that's 6 1/4, we get $7,044,000 as our final market value. And that is my presentation. Thank you.
Questions? Jennifer?
Yes, one quick question. When you're stabilizing the repair and maintenance, you've gone with stabilizing it at $1,500 per year instead of using an average. Is there a reason why you did that?
There is, and it's the same one where we would reduce it if it were significantly over. The subject property appears to be spending significantly under, or the management of the property seems to be spending significantly under what one would typically find for a building in this condition of that age in that location. So we've made that upward adjustment.
Okay, but we're making downward adjustments for size and condition, but then we're making another downward adjustment due to what they should be spending on repair and maintenance, as opposed to then using a reduced, the actual number for the maintenance is.
Well, what we're looking to do, of course, is bring it to a fair reflection of market. So what would it rent for on the market? And that's what we've done in making those reductions based on size and condition, et cetera. And if you look at the age and condition of the majority of these units, normally you're going to find more R&M being spent in the marketplace at $1,500, which is why we've made the adjustment. We're not double dipping or anything, we're merely making it reflective of normalized market conditions.
Okay, thank you.
Cynthia?
I just wanted to clarify, you said in your rent, on page 13 in your rent work up there, you said you reduced it by 10%, the actual average?
That's correct.
And
yes.
and what was the reason for that?
Based on the condition of the units and also the size, these units are particularly small. Now,
They're small.
I know that we have a photo there of a kitchen where the cabinetry has been replaced, but that is not the norm in the property. They're dominantly original, and we have bachelor units of 320 square feet.
And so you think that if this was on the open market, these would go for less than what Manitoba Housing is charging?
No, Manitoba Housing is charging rent geared to income, so they're actually collecting $496,227, and we're projecting $1,049,000, $360. So there is no Manitoba Housing rent. They pay based on rent to income.
Yeah.
Right.
But in terms of their overall income, is what I was, okay, thank you. That's all I had.
Robert?
So you think these units are considerably smaller than the comparables used by the assessor?
No, I'm not looking at the assessor's comparables at all. I'm looking at the CMHC statistics. They're looking at the average of the universe as a whole for Centennial and various other areas. These units at 320 square feet are smaller than one would typically find, and their condition would be inferior as well. What Manitoba Housing typically did when they developed these units is make as many, they want to house as many people as possible in the space that they have, so their units would tend to be on the small side for the type that they are.
So you didn't look at the assessor's comparables in terms of what she used in her model?
Well, I don't
or
see the
compared to her
assessors,
model?
I don't see her comparables in advance of the exchange date, and no, I did not look at her comparables.
And you say these are in poor condition?
They would be in below average condition. If we're looking at the comparables, we have a property that's riverfront, 340 Assiniboine. 227 Vaughan is adjacent to the bay. 314 Broadway, those are very large historic suites, I believe. I'm not familiar with the 389 Balmoral.
So the condition is below average, then?
It would be, yes.
So you've expected it?
I have, yes.
Okay, thank you.
So your expense, you're using the stabilized at 5675. The city uses 59.10, that's a model?
Is that a question for me or?
I'm asking Trevor right now. 5910, is that a model on the cities? I guess it would be.
I'm not sure if I asked, but I believe that it's model, but it would be fair to have the assessor answer that.
Okay. Is that a model, 5910?
Yes.
It is. Maybe we should be using that instead of 5675, she was questioning it.
Well, we could, but I didn't feel that would be fair, so we're looking at it in the manner we did. I'm happy to go with a higher number, obviously, but in
No, it's
truth,
just-
I think we're being fair at the value that we arrived at,
So you want to change it to a 625 cap?
based on
Yeah.
the 6.25% capitalization rate.
I've got no further questions. We'll leave it alone. That concludes the matters. Look at that. Let's take a 5. Just because I have to.
For sure.
Just because I have to.